So, hello everyone. Today's guest is Mersudin Forbes, portfolio SEO director, SEO agency advisor, and e-com SEO specialist, and much more. And he is bringing 15 years of experience. Today, I really want to talk about SEO testing because that is always a hot topic. How we can go into SEO testing, how to have the right mindset behind that, how to not be distracted with so many different small but not impactful things when it comes to SEO testing, and like how to bring the value that we want to bring to our SEO clients. So, Mersudin, thank you so much for joining, and the stage is yours.
Thank you for having me. And that intro, I think I need to shorten my job title. It's like do
However you
SEO,
like.
advise agencies on SEO, and I do e-commerce. I think I might need to speak to a branding specialist or something.
And messaging. But how you
Yeah.
like, how you feel the most from these titles?
Yeah. I do really enjoy helping other agencies put systems and processes in place to help their clients test more and hypothesize based on their objectives. And that comes from testing the approaches with my own customers as well. So it's a varied job. Obviously, I also have a smaller agency called Multiply where we only do Shopify specific SEO. And that really comes down to helping stores over 100 SKUs re-merchandise their products into either what they already have, so just reordering their product inventory, or helping them find new categories within the stock that they have already. So within days, we usually find over 10 new categories that they can re-merchandise their stock for and get new traffic for. But going back to the kind of role, yeah, I just enjoy the nature of really figuring out a client's objectives and then matching whatever tests and hypotheses that should be run to achieve that objective. And sometimes they're incremental, sometimes they're across thousands of pages. And usually, you'll get the whole notion from the SEO community that you need statistical significance for tests. And that is true a lot of the time. But actually, not all customers have got 10,000 sessions a month to a certain page. Sometimes they have hundreds, and there are still ways of exploring whether they can win using a hypothesis-driven system for testing approaches to SEO. So, yeah, for me, it's all about just trying to help other SEOs and clients really understand, okay, what part of our sites can we test? What hypothesis do we have? And I actually use credit going out to searchpilot.com. They have a large they work with enterprise clients on incremental and randomized SEO testing. But they have a hypothesis flowchart that I like to work to, which is essentially asks 3 questions as to whether you have a valid hypothesis to a test. So, are new keywords being targeted? Can the change improve existing rankings? And will the appearance on the SERPs change as a result of whatever hypothesis and test we want to run? And I try to stick that with most of the approaches and recommendations that I make to customers. I mean, one recent example, customer came to me and said, Mersudin, we want to know what proportion of traffic of users that search for the keyword car auction want to buy a car at auction versus want to sell a car at auction, because actually we'd like to get a split between the two. Just having lots of people that want to buy, lots of demand, but obviously supply will be stifled by the fact that we also need people who want to auction their car and also have to know how easy it is to auction their car. So the objective was that they'd like more users that would submit their car for auction. Our hypothesis was that it's roughly an 80-20 split. So basically 80% of users that search car auction will usually want to buy a car, and 20% would want to list the car for sale. And the hypothesis we ran is, why don't we have a primary and secondary action on the car auction page? And they're a local auctioneer, so obviously if you were to Google car auctions nationally, there's some large players, but actually it does have a local search intent, so local to me. And we ran a test. The hypothesis was that we would get more conversions from people that would want to list their car, and that we'd get better rankings where the intent was to sell a car at auction. So the test we ran was primary is a search field for people who want to find a car to buy, and the secondary field was to be able to sell their car. And our hypothesis was that we'll get better performance actually across the board. And we ran a test, and average positions for both of those queries, including buy and sell car at auction, increased, as well as their leads for people who want to sell their car, right? Which is obviously the main output. But actually, the whole thing behind testing is to be able to go to a customer, we understand what your objective is, and here's what we're going to do to test whether we can achieve more performance for that objective, and here's why. So that kind of understanding what a hypothesis is and what hypothesis you would make is really important. But then actually why and how we're running the tests we want to run. You know, a lot of people will run controlled tests, but they'll run controlled tests on a page versus a page rather than trying to randomize the type of audiences that they can get from different pages. So there's obviously a lot more to not bringing bias into testing, which randomizing pages, and there's lots of collateral on that on the Search Pilot website in terms of how to run a proper report, which I can obviously send across after this. But the main work we do with all of the clients that I have is before we run any kind of SEO work or tactics that we want to deploy, we will always set up a hypothesis to say what is it that we actually want to achieve. And that hypothesis is always backed with what the customer's overall objective is. And I had a conversation with someone from an agency the other day that want to essentially approach this in the same way. The magic for the customer is hope and also a view as to what it could look like. Because a lot of tactics in SEO come, okay, we've done the foundational work, here are all the things we're going to do, but the why is sometimes a little bit lost. So having here's what we think will happen if we do this, and here's the way that we're monitoring whether it's working or not, puts the client in a really nice flow of, okay, they know what my objectives are, here are the things they want to test, and I can quite clearly see at the end whether it's worked or not. Now, obviously, the magic is in having the tooling to be able to do that. So Search Pilot enterprise level works really well, but actually we use SEOtesting.com, which is a really accessible platform for most SEOs, whether you're a freelancer, mid to high level agency, to really start running some controlled group page level and single page level tests if you want to. So one of the things that I try to really embody is that everyone can do this. Everyone can show a customer that they understand objectives and that they want to run tests. Because as soon as you say the word tests in the SEO space, it's, well, we're playing with the customer's money. Why would we want to test things? This is dangerous. We should be testing it on our own sites. And by the way, I do run a lot of tests on my own sites. I've coming up to 13 domains that run across e-commerce and publishing, news, health, finance, that I run a lot of the tests on. But actually, customers love being able to be on the journey and be able to actually test these approaches themselves, because not only is it industry specific, but actually customer websites are all individual and all behave in a different way. So being able to apply this whole methodology around hypothesizing, implementation, results, being accessible to everyone is where I'd really like the industry to be able to go, because the whole foundational process-driven work, eventually, if your customer doesn't really understand where you're going and why you're going there, sometimes the results don't even matter. I've seen people lose customers with great results, but they've just got used to the kind of the run-of-the-mill SEO work that normally gets done, and they think they can either do it themselves or get something better elsewhere. So, yeah, long-winded way of saying matching customer objectives with a hypothesis and a test. I find it to be the easiest way of managing SEO campaigns. How does that How does that sound to you? Is there anything there that rings true, or processes or approaches you've seen before in terms of testing and SEO?
Yeah, and I'm always thinking about approaching and challenges that like SEOs are having to do the tests, like because we have a lot of ideas to test, like even on our personal sites and then like to the client. But the biggest challenge that I'm seeing, and like also my SEO clients with their clients, is that how to prove to the client that SEO test will be worth it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So forecasting, which we all hate, but also love at the same time. There are lots of tools that will allow you to try and forecast an outcome, either whether it's positional, SERP changes, or additional query gains through, either content implementation or UX, where, we may say actually one test could be we've got a topical gap. We've done a topical gap analysis and we're missing about 3 to 4 different pages of content or intent across our portfolio. So we think by adding these clusters or hubs of pages will improve rankings for what we have, plus get us additional queries, right? That needs some forecasting done to it. And even if it's hypothetical, the way that I get over that whole hurdle is I go back to the objective. We'd like more leads from this area. This area of the business requires performance for this area of search. The only way that we'll know whether that will perform is based on this hypothesis. And actually, my most successful customers, we have failed on more tests than we've won, because the learnings from the actual failings resulted in a load more work that eventually got them to win. So I think we all set ourselves up with this whole resourcing process where the customer's paying for us to roll this stuff out. But actually, customers, when you try and approach this way of SEO, will go, well, it can't all work. There's no way we can get a 100% success rate. Nothing has a 100% success rate most of the time, right? So, and that the irony of me saying most of the time there is the point I'm making, right? So we have to get away from everything's going to work to this is a test that we think will work well, but if it doesn't, all of the learnings will be taken away from the next test. My lowest success rate customer is 50-50. 50% of the tests don't work, but the ones that do, we do well from. The ones that don't, we take learnings away from.
Yeah, and also I want to really highlight the importance of testing because, in today's world, it's not just enough doing some technical, like checking optimization on the page, content, backlink. No, we really need to make a one step further and really be heavily involved with these testing, because especially if we get excited, to get that intention of our customers to even like for them to be excited about new tests and like what will bring, that is a really where our customers are paying attention to ourselves and like the value that we are bringing to the company. Because in the end of the day, it's everything about the value. If they don't see the value that we are bringing to the business, they will try to get someone who will do that for them. Also, like this testing, what I would like to explore more is how to actually not be distracted with so many testing, and like how to be sure the testing are impacting like the business with the money, with the new leads, with the most significant importance that we are doing with the business.
Yeah. So first of all, going back to that whole objective exercise. So do we fully understand, based on the business units? One of the first questions I ask customers before they onboard is, how do you make money? And how do you make that money by service? Because actually, if you're an e-commerce store, you have average order values for different categorization, and you may have add-ons and certain ways that you upsell certain products. For a service, you may have lead times and completion times for certain services that make more money than others. There are some service-based businesses I work with that make £1,000 per order, and some make 1 million per order, right? So it's about understanding the unit economics of how the business makes money. Once you know what those unit economics are, you would then go, okay, based on the lead time of this type of service and how much money you make and what your margins are, here are the top 5 in order of what we'd want to affect, right? Then we know what the objectives are in terms of what we're focusing on. Then we go, here's the strategy to achieve that. And here are the tactics and testing that we need to deploy to try and get to that objective of, you might have a service that's third in the list of acquisition, but actually on a margin point of view makes more money. So they might say, we want more leads from that type of service, in which case we go, okay, cool. Currently your share of voice and share of search isn't optimal in that area. Here's how we think we're going to achieve that. And then we tie all of that back to whether it's new content production, whether it's optimization, internal linking, anything you can think of to do with SEO is always then tied back to our hypothesis behind doing this is because we think X is going to happen. And then foundationally tracking, making sure that reporting is solid. I was going to say to you, like, one of the key things to having customers onboarded and fully on board straight away is that most customers go through a bit of a change curve when they commit to work. A lot of customers in a service-based industry like ours go through buyer's remorse in the first week. Did I make the right decision? When will I hear from them? What's next, right? When you ask all those questions and you get ahead of those things, you can quite quickly get into the strategic and rollout phase because you're not spending your time reassuring your customer. Right? So one of the things that I remind every customer that when we're on board, first of all, go in place, we try and find some observations that we send them in the first week. So they're not waiting and wondering what it is we're doing. But actually, I remind them about this is going to be a testing approach. We understand your unit economics. We understand how you make money. The tracking is in place to prove whether our work is going to impact your bottom line. Here's our hypothesis behind how that's going to work. And here are all the tests that need to be rolled out. And one thing I'd like to add to that is we actually have something we call a central hypothesis, and we then code each action back to that hypothesis in terms of what we think we want to do. So every piece of work that we then say is for the client to do or for us to do is coded back to that central view that we have as to what we think is going to happen. So if we say, like, we think by improving internal linking to this page, it's going to improve performance and position and also traffic and inquiries to this page and service, we lay out all of the work that is to do with that, whether it's installing something like inlinks or an internal link analysis. It all ties back to that central hypothesis of what we said we had. And the client can then go in, see, okay, cool, we're 50% through all that work. It's all tied back to here. And then we give it either, a 1 to 6 week testing period after implementation to see, based on the traffic available, to see what that performance actually looks like. So we like to have everything end to end. But if you don't think about your own customer's journey that they go through, enterprise customers, owner-led businesses, management people, businesses that are enterprise that have marketing teams, the actual journey is entirely different. A business owner is much more likely to go through the buyer's remorse curve faster than a team that's gone through a tendering process that has stakeholders to report to, but has a load of other steps to go through. The actual steps aren't the same. So it's really worth thinking about who are you onboarding, what are their most important objectives that you need to keep reminding them about. Is the tracking and are the systems in place to report on good or bad performance? Like I say, not every test wins, right? So you need to be able to say, why did it not work or why did it work? If you can nail that, it's quite a smooth process. But if you haven't thought about it, then it becomes a little bit tricky to try and deploy.
And which kind of most commonly biases you saw like in the past that like people are making mistakes regarding these testing? Like,
Assuming that everything takes a long time.
Mm-hmm.
So
And long time you define, but
months.
months. Okay.
You know, like we've gone through a testing phase where we re-merchandise the client and introduced new categories based on the stock that they already have. And our hypothesis was, hey, you actually have more stock and more varied stock than your competitors. You just don't have this category, right? It doesn't exist. Our hypothesis is that if we create it, internally link it correctly through your site and provide a good user experience, that it will rank. It took 10 days. And so this whole notion and bias that it should all take a long time, we should have it all fully forecasted and scoped, and that's exactly what our clients always expect. It's just simply not true. As long as you have the customer journey correct. So for a business or owner-led business that I work with, I make things a lot more specific. Whereas when I'm working with a larger marketing team who already aren't perhaps as green in the process, they've seen different approaches, sometimes it's a bit more top level, so we can move faster. So it's really, you have to understand where your customer is, why you're working with them in the first place, and where they are in that understanding curve to make sure that, you know, you don't hit those biases. Because, you know, the whole SEO takes a long time. We should, you know, wait months before progress is seen when we test things. Just sometimes just simply isn't true. And I find that to be probably the most common thing that I see. The other one is that every test has to work or the customer isn't going to see the value. That's, you know, that's also a strongly held belief and also a fear. I think just generally in the agency space and freelancer space, you know, I couldn't possibly suggest a test that doesn't work. If we all kind of put ourselves on that impossible to achieve pedestal, of course we will be unhappy, the customer will be unhappy. You know, if we think that the best course of action is to tell a customer that everything we do and say is always going to work, when it doesn't work, that expectation leads to disappointment. You know, I don't know everything. I've been in SEO for 15 years. I still get a second opinion on a lot of my work. You know, it's having that comfort to know not everything that we suggest is going to work, but a lot of things are, and when they don't, we'll learn. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think here is coming like fear of the failure to the surface. You know, like
Yeah.
if the fear of failure is so strong, we will be unable to even like recommend something, present that confidently, you know, like because if the client is seeing that like we are not even confident about things that we are going to test, how he can be confident in us, in our approach. So maybe in the early stages, when did you face like this fear, and like maybe some of the advices, like how did you overcome that fear of being wrong, fear of failure?
I just, before I say this, on a caveat, I was in the agency space for 11 years and I loved every minute of it. My fear of failing came from being in the space where they were not my customers, right? They're agency's customers, and I couldn't possibly fail. The thing that I would advise all practitioners in SEO, whether they're agencies or consultants like me, is to start being really comfortable that we cannot know everything. So to say that every test is going to work would be simply a lie, because it just doesn't happen. And the more, I mean, it's coming up to nearly 2 years since I've been consulting by myself. The initial phases, yeah, there was a bit of hangover where it's like I couldn't possibly get some things wrong. Not wrong detrimentally, but as in my hypothesis of what I said would happen didn't exactly happen as I laid out. Sometimes the test failed, sometimes it worked. The more instances I had that like that, the more confidence I got is that the customers are there with me on the journey and they buy into the process because our values align and they want to learn just as much as I want to learn. Of course, when stakes are high, we would usually do some preliminary tests before we roll out lots of high traffic category tests or pages that drive the volume of traffic, right? We would de-risk that by perhaps looking at pages that don't drive as much traffic to see if the hypothesis sticks, and then slowly ramping that up. But my fear of failing started subsiding when I realized that it's impossible to always get your predictions correct. I'm sure you've been aware of site speed projects. I certainly have, where we've put a lot of efforts into saying to the customer at scale, improving speed. This is one of the most common failures I see. Will improve rankings across the board. It will improve user experience. So those two things together, we'll see, aggregate improvement. There have been many times when I've seen that not work. And there have also been times when I've seen it work, because again, it's industry and client specific. And it's things like that you start thinking, okay, cool. Well, it's all a test. Even the foundational work is a test. Even the run-of-the-mill stuff that we know to normally work, it's still a test. And it doesn't always work. It's impossible to predict every single outcome. And I've had a few in the last 2 years. I've probably had 2 customers where the success rate wasn't fully aligned with their expectation. And that was fully down to me, because I did not align the way that I worked with the way that they were expecting to work, and we all make those decisions, right? To try and align customers' values with our own, and also how we work together. Yeah, when that didn't work is when I didn't fully align that. And all of the customers I work with now, none of them have got 100% success rate with what we roll out in terms of testing. And they're all fine, because we're still seeing hundreds of percents of traffic in terms of year-on-year growth. And it's just, like I say, the ones where we failed more is where we've learned more, but then they've won in the end. And that whole fear of failure, that was a baptism of fire at first, because I went from looking after my boss's customers to looking after my own, and I think that was a big step change to accepting failing, because the only person I have to be accountable to is myself. And sometimes we're our own worst bosses, as I'm sure you can probably appreciate. So yeah, overall, I think it's aligning the customer with that way of working explicitly. And the more you do that, the more you can accept when things don't quite go correctly. Obviously, due diligence, we wouldn't do anything negligible, in terms of we wouldn't do anything negligent, that we know 100% not to work and have a detrimental impact to performance. There are certainly a lot of those things that you could put in that bucket. Obviously, we try to avoid those, but even then, it's not guaranteed.
And here, I think I see what is happening. That we are hesitant to come up with the new tests, because we are taking the 100% responsibility what will happen. And I'm not talking about that we will not incorporate the steps that we need to. I'm just thinking about the responsibility that we are taking, that it's some of the parts of this responsibility is not ours, so much things are on the Google side, Google algorithm pages, business niche, season business, so many different factors are impacting that test. And we are just harming the whole journey if we are taking the 100% responsibility for all these tests, or anything that we do in the SEO. Because in the most of cases, that is something that we are we stuck, we are hesitant to do different things, because we just took, it's everything on us, and then when all these rankings are dropping, Google updates are coming, then again the whole responsibility is on us. So just and I'm not telling that just take it no, this is not my responsibility. I'm thinking more about being realistic, if we are in the SEO space, and there are so many different factors that we are facing now. So taking that overly and being overly responsive for something, it's not ideal mindset approach here. Definitely we need to be like more open to like what is actually impacting, and just like learn from it and then like come up with the new insights.
Totally agreed. I think there's a balance of caring about every outcome and taking responsibility for every outcome. You can split those two things, because if you take responsibility for every outcome, that's a very slippery slope to then not making good knock-on decisions, because actually those things can affect you. Of course, I care about every outcome for all of the clients that I work with. There are moving parts, like you say. Sometimes the responsibility lies with the customer's development team. Most of the time, they roll things out to scope. Sometimes they don't, and you have to take the emotion about that stuff out and try and get the best outcome for the customer themselves. And what I mean, caring sounds like an emotional reaction, but actually, I think in the service space where we're dealing with customers, caring doesn't have to mean being emotional and taking everything on your shoulders. It just means that I care about all of the outcomes that happen. Doesn't mean I'm responsible for every single one. They don't all have to negatively affect me when they don't happen in the same way. And the SEO space, like you say, recent 20 algorithm updates, or however many we've had in the last year and a half, 2 years. Sometimes those things are out of your control. The changes and the way that quality of your clients' websites are being perceived are also out of your control. They always say control the controllables in terms of what you can affect. There are a lot of moving parts in SEO that you can't control. Bugs, ranking bugs, indexation bugs. If we took responsibility for all those things, it would be an absolute roller coaster. But of course, I care about ranking bugs, and I also care about indexation bugs and core algorithm updates, because I want to understand what the next steps are. But if I took all of those things on personally, as well as all the tests that we run, we would all be an emotional wreck, I think, in this industry.
Yeah, that is a thing. When we are aligning all the success or like drops with our kind of like personal value, then it comes very hard, like for us to deal with all these changes and like everything. So definitely we really need to be realistic about it's not in our heads everything. Like a lot of is, but also a lot of isn't. So when we are kind of like detaching ourselves like from the kind of like the reality that we are facing, we are getting like more easy on ourselves and like not becoming the overwhelmed and like exhausted by all these like changes that are happening in the SEO world.
And you have to be comfortable with sometimes just saying, we should not react at all. I had a customer before the most recent algo updates, saw some fluctuations in one of their, unit economics wise, it wasn't the highest service area in terms of volume, margin, but it was still important to them. They rang me and they said, Mersudin, we've seen this fluctuation. What should we do? I said, nothing. You should do nothing on this occasion, because there is nothing additional that I can recommend to you that isn't outside of the recommendations we've already followed. And to them, that was a surprise. I'm ringing my SEO consultant. I'm asking him what to do, and he's saying nothing. Do nothing. And I've had a few instances with different SEOs that I've had that conversation with. These conversations go back almost decades now, with similar things have happened. And surprise, surprise, there were some recoveries in August, because we all, again, we all want to kind of take this responsibility on and go, we have to come up with something. Well, sometimes the best course of action is no action. And you can care about that. You can't always take responsibility for everything, I guess is what I'm saying. And when it comes to the SEO space and kind of this hypothesis-driven test approach that I like to embody, it's just about being consistent. If you run SEO and you run it in a testing-driven approach, make sure that everything's based on a hypothesis. If you like to follow checklists and best practice foundational work, stick to that. It's still technically a test, is what I'm saying. It's all a test. Because I think for anyone to turn around and say they know exactly the steps that need to be followed for every site, every industry, on every occasion, I'm sorry, I just would struggle to believe that. And you know, I think people like yourself who support people in the industry, to give them confidence, and you know, to be an ear for them, be some support. I think we need more of that. Because actually, you know, people do doubt themselves a lot in this space. It's not like you're going to go to university, learn a specific subject and be able to apply that in an objective manner. You know, this is one of the few spaces where the industry probably changes daily to some extent. So, you know, having people like yourselves around to, you know, to help the new up and comers, but as you explained to me before, even some experienced people who've gone through the process, you know, and to be able to learn from you is really key, because yeah, we can put a lot of our self-importance on the success of everything that we advise people on, because that's what we're being paid for. But you know, even lawyers, accountants, people who've gone through years and years of training can make mistakes, and you know, that's the same for this space. So yeah, I guess my takeaway is it's all a test, it's all a hypothesis. There is a way of centralizing that and making it consistent, which makes your customers feel like they're going through a journey and that they're learning alongside. Because each time I send a test outcome to a customer, I will say, this worked because of this, or I believe it to be this, so we should do this next. And it's not just, we've completed this scope of work, we're now going to do this over here just because we do. I think that becomes boring eventually, it becomes stale, and is, I think, probably one of the core reasons why agencies churn customers, because the customers see something shiny over here, they can't align themselves with the process or the, like I say, the learning progression of what testing does and hypothesis-based testing does. And we really don't need to overcomplicate it. It's like, what do we think is going to happen by doing this? That's our hypothesis. Do we have ways of measuring whether it worked or not? It's that simple. It's just integrating that into your processes internally. Yeah, I'll stop going on about how important it is, but yeah, that to me is a real passion now. It's just to try and simplify and demystify the process.
And I think that is like the biggest problem. SEOs are trying to overcomplicate that, you know, like adding like so many different like things to there, but like in the basis, it's simple. And one thing that has been left that I really want to cover is, you know, like statistical significance, like how to be kind of like in the way, like how much time, like what kind of numbers will tell us that like we hit that kind of like good base to make a decent decision and like move further.
I mean, if you're going off of like black and white information, things that you'll read about testing and statistical significance, obviously the more numbers we have to work with faster, the sooner we can reach statistical significance for tests. So the more sessions that we can test against, the sooner we can make decisions on whether things work or not. My point is that even with smaller sets of traffic, there are a couple of levers we can pull, which is extend the test, but also start asking questions around, we've asked the customer how they make money. We're applying the test in an area where it applies to a service or something where they want to see additional visibility on. We track performance, average rankings, query counts, traffic. Then the next question is are they getting more inquiries and tests? And sometimes actually we've had a test running for 2 months. It's still running now. There's not enough volume to shorten that period, right? So it's a longer time period. That's one of the occasions where, of course, having longer to test is a sensible thing to do, because we're talking about lead numbers going from 3 to 9 a day, but the actual value of those leads when they convert being very, very high. We're talking about small traffic numbers. So my point is, statistical significance is great to talk about, and we want to reach it as soon as possible. But when the numbers don't allow it, you need to allow a longer window, but also tie it back to, is the customer getting what they need? Is the objective more leads? If so, when do we start measuring a marked improvement in them actually having a business related outcome out of the work? So for me, obviously, the shorter the better, the more traffic we have. We follow the same testing methods as most people would test for statistical significance, which is, how quickly what numbers do we need to reach a conclusion? But it does need to be fluid. Like I say, for us, an average test period would be 4 weeks. Sometimes that's numbers based. So have we got enough sessions? Sometimes it's, are we seeing more leads coming through? And those numbers are lower. And actually, when we tie this back to, are we seeing more actions that we want to see, whether that's a form fill, purchase, lead gen form. My new pet hate of the year is lead gen as a word. But you can actually make more decisions on the bottom line if you're trying to affect a certain bottom line from traffic, when you're going from 10 to 15 clicks a day, right? When those are high value clicks, you can actually start measuring whether they're turning into conversions. So we not only look at traffic, like statistical significance, we try and measure whatever the outcome needs to be immediately, so that even though we haven't massively affected traffic, maybe 10-15%, but actually we're seeing more leads coming through immediately. So sometimes it's a ranking test, sometimes it's just converting more traffic from the traffic, which delves slightly more into UX. But I do think that if you truly understand search intent from a user, even though I'm not a UX expert, I give advice on the order of the content, how that content can be displayed, what language we should use, and then that usually turns into better conversion rates as well on certain pages. So yeah, I think we all get tied up in, we need large numbers to hit statistical significance quickly, but actually it needs to be a holistic approach that also considers the bottom line or whatever is the customer's trying to achieve.
Yeah, I really like it, and I really like the way that we simplified, because that was a purpose of this topic, is to actually encourage SEOs to do more tests, to show the more value to their clients, because those are definitely something that we already need to incorporate. It's not like the future, it's already something that we constantly need to do, because those are the creative ways how we can bring more value to the business that we are doing SEO, just like testing and seeing what's going to work. It's a huge possibility that some of them it's not going to work, but at least we should be comfortable with testing and trying to different things, and just being creative in the way, because SEO is a very creative job, but sometimes we are just so strict and straightforward to these technical content things, and there is so many outside of box things that we can really get the value of.
It's most of the time with this approach, it's not what you say, it's the order you say it in and how you say it. And my voice does not embody enthusiasm very well. I have to try really hard to sound enthusiastic. But when I speak to my customers about tests, we say, look, this is the process we're going to follow and why. And we're really excited about this because actually we will be able to run campaigns and projects in a way that you can easily see that we're trying to achieve your objective and whether the actions that we're taking are actually getting there. And they're like, okay, great. When do we start? Rather than here's the checklist process, and I'm generalizing this because I know a lot of great agencies that don't follow a checklist process. They make very bespoke and well thought out SEO campaigns for their customers. So yeah, just before I'm not bashing the kind of checklist process either, or generalizing most SEO approaches. But my point is, it's actually more about the order you say it in, which always starts with, how do you make money? In what way do you make money? How does the makeup of the unit economics that you have work? And here are the things that we hypothesize will work for that area of your business. And these are the tactics that we're going to deploy. And this is how we're going to prove that it works. And like I say, just to recap, SEOtesting.com is available, I think, to most SEO practitioners because of its pricing and ease of use. Search Pilot, obviously more enterprise level, agency level, and large, e-commerce platforms and large sites with, lots of inventory and pages. You can do lots of stuff at scale there. But there are ways of doing this, and in terms of coming up with creative ideas for new stuff, keyword insights and a topical gap analysis, using that tool, I always find really good, because you can ingest the client's data, what they have now, cluster, take new keyword research and ideas, and you can kind of smash together this view of how they're performing in their landscape. And when you look at those gaps where they've got competing pages, gaps in content and clusters and hubs, it's a bit like you say, it's very easy to become creative and to go, my hypothesis is that if we create all of these missing pieces of content and we structure them in a way to make it easier for the user to read, and we internally link it correctly, our hypothesis is that you're going to rank for all this stuff and get all this traffic you didn't have before. And the customer's like, great, night and day, when do we start? Cool, this is how long it will take, this is what we'll do. We've got tracking in place at the end. So I think it sounds like a boring subject, but it's actually really good once you get into the mechanics of it. And I think the mechanics are different for how people run, the types of customers they have. But thinking about that journey is really important, because, like I said, I've had 2 occasions in the last 2 years where I think I didn't align the expectations properly and the journey wasn't quite correct for the customer. And that's on me. Like I said earlier, I care about the outcome, but actually I was responsible for the outcome on those 2 occasions, where it was entirely on me to make sure that the customer understood the journey. I didn't do that very well at that point in time. But those are 2 occasions. Every single other project I'm involved in is working really well, and traffic is performing, and we're seeing the leads and the revenue that we need, because it's done correctly and the customer understands the journey. And yeah, my happiest customer has the least success rate in terms of testing. So that should give everyone a bit of, how can I say it, confidence to go, it doesn't all have to work. But as long as you know how to communicate the expectations, you won't go wrong.
And we would be also surprised how much our customers can help us here, and how much they are going to be excited about this testing and come up with new ideas. So because I think in the SEO world, the lacking of the kind of customer engagement through the SEO process is something that we are missing. Once we are including them in our process, then they are seeing all this engagement value, and they want to SEO work. And of course, we will be able to get even bigger budgets, extend the contracts, getting the recommendations. So it's win-win for everyone.
Some customers will add a hypothesis to the documentation. Now, I don't even add some of these test ideas anymore.
Yeah.
Because they've gone on the journey, they can see it works, and they'll go, I have an idea. I think that if I add this to this page, actually it will really benefit these types of users. Ideas I never had.
Yeah, and those are
yeah, go on. There you go.
And those are the clients that is lovely to work, because we are feeling as a team. It's not like you are a client, I am SEO consultant, we are the team. Let's see how it can go well for us.
Yeah, that's the joy of this. Like I said earlier, the industry, you don't have a playbook, but actually the bonus behind that is that you can make it whatever you like. You can, ICPs that I like to run tests and hypotheses. There's lots of different ways that you could approach how you run that in many different ways. You can be more data driven, you can be more content gap driven, you can decide what kind of tests pass and fail. Do you want to be more statistical significance driven in terms of there need to be certain levels of traffic and data available? It could be that your customers are only large customers, so you can work with those numbers and really figure out like what is the best process for your customer makeup. For me, I have to be slightly agile because my customers are quite varied, and I like that. I like being able to advise different levels of traffic, and for some owner-led businesses where they're perhaps smaller, their contribution in terms of my work as their overall marketing spend can be quite high at times. So of course I care about the outcome. Sometimes it means more, and when you don't pay attention to, okay, cool, well, the work that I'm doing is 50% of this customer's total marketing retainer monthly. I care about this outcome. I want to make sure that these tests work. But like we said at the beginning, I can't be responsible for every outcome, but I certainly care about every single piece of work that we do, because to some customers it's a big investment for them. But it's knowing that you're doing the right stuff. So
all right, so much new topics have been opened here, but I really think that we nail it down like to the very straightforward approach for the SEOs who really want to start even like more testing or start with their like first testing. So I really hope that like SEOs will be encouraged to do more of this. So Mersudin, thank you so much for your time and energy. So thank you so much, and maybe I will see you in one of the episodes next year.
Yes, absolutely, and thank you for having me. It's I think you're one of the people that's really helping the SEO industry in terms of just the people that are involved. So it was a pleasure to come on board, and I'll be delighted to come back and maybe talk about SEO processing or customer journey. Let me know, and it'd be great.
Nice, I love it. Okay, thank you so much, and have a great day.
Speak to you soon.